Around some pretty incredible people in my career, in my life, and he's right up there, you know, at the top of that list. You know, he's among the best. And I say that I think that, you know, certainly the man he is, you know, just really just great character. But beyond that, like, you know, he has a military background, and, you know, it shows. You know, he's just always about trying to help those around him and lift everybody else up. And I truly respect this man. Very much looking forward to hearing what he has to say. And without further ado, here's Al Garcia.
Thank you. Would you click for me on that?
Yeah.
All right, I try to turn that up a lot louder, but apparently there's a governor here that does not allow me to go any further, because that song will rock your life, right? Guys, everything you heard about Virginia, I am polar opposite. I love that woman. I adore her. I respect her. She went through 9/11 and wanted to psychoanalyze them. I went through 9/11 and had a very different experience. And I'm going to share some of that with you today. And thank you for the disclaimer, there's not a single logo of Coldwell Banker on my presentation today for a reason. I wanted to give you a perspective of military leadership and then adapt it to the real estate business. I was asked to do this a long time ago. I don't think he's in the audience today. John Bradley asked me to do this like 12 years ago when I first met him in a leadership class here. And quite frankly, it took me 12 years because I didn't know what the hell I was doing in business. I had a lot of experience in leadership in the military, but it took me 12 years of leadership in real estate to really understand as an agent what it took to lead your clients, as a manager what it took to lead my agents, and now as an RVP what it takes to lead my managers. And it's been a process, and it is something that you grow through, and you go little by little growing. So I'm going to pick up the pace, and I'm going to go through this. Oh, you got me? All right, so lessons in leadership. Real quick, this is my intro. So next slide. All right, this is me. This is the only time CB will come up in the presentation. Obviously, I am your regional vice president for the greater Philadelphia and South Jersey markets, HUA. We are so pumped to have you down there, so please visit us if you haven't. Next click. And I was blessed to have once been a warrior king. No curses. Once. And I will share some of that, and I will close with a little meaning of what that is. That's actually the title of a book. Next slide. These are my lessons in leadership for you, 5 lessons. Next slide. And this is my agenda. So let's get started. So lesson 1, leadership. I'm going to go because I have to click through some of the stuff here. Yeah, I actually could, but I do have some video clips here, guys.
Well, you just said that way.
All right, here we go. Let's try this. Leadership. This is the definition of leadership. And this is the whole crux of the freaking story. That's why I'm here today. Guys, what training have any of you ever had in leadership? What training have I ever had in leadership in real estate? Yet look at the definition. It's what you do every single day. Every single day you guys take somebody to accomplish their goal. But we don't, right? For the most part, none of us have had formal leadership training in real estate. You get training on how to list a property, sell a property, market yourself, social media, networking, you name it, you get training. You don't get training in leadership. Today, hopefully, I'll change that a little bit for you. Army Ranger, first Army training I ever attended, well, first major Army training I ever attended was United States Army Ranger School, right? You go through, you get tortured for about 70 days. Ooh, I can't even talk. I need some water. So you go through this training, right? 70 days of training, food deprivation, sleep deprivation. And you think you're going to be like the best thing in the world. And then all of a sudden you realize, like day 1, chapter 1, that's actually, look at the top. That's actually chapter 1-1. I think the United States Army is going to train me how to be the most elite, badass soldier in the world. And the first thing they do is they say, let's back it up. Let me give you a definition of leadership. Let's talk about what we're doing. All of those videos, if you caught any of the screenshots before, the amazing firepower that we have in the United States military, of which I was awed to command a lot of it, they kind of blew me away. Chapter 1 says that I was the most important part of that leadership. Competent and confident leadership is the most important element of combat power. So then I thought, all right, so we've got to take this from military leadership, and let's just quickly do the John Bradley. What does it mean to you? All I had to do was change one word. Competent and confident leadership is the most important element of sales power. which is what we all do. But the competent and confident part is the mind, like, that shit's mind-blowing, guys. Like confident leadership. This is lesson 1. If you forget everything I'm about to say in the next couple of slides, just remember confident leadership. And if you find yourself you don't have the level of confidence that you need, build the competence. Build the freaking competence. The Army gave me a PhD in death and destruction, of which I will always be honored to have. Army Ranger School, Special Forces, Airborne School, Commander's courses, you name it, I've done it all. But the competent part was only to make me more confident. And that's what I realized. And I'm like, oh, are we really doing that? Am I really training my people here to be competent, confident leaders? If not, how do I fix it? The other part of this thing, it goes on to expand that definition. The leader provides 3 things, right? Purpose, direction, and motivation. This is such a big fix. Guys, we get direction from our leaders all the time. We get directions. But when was the last time you got real motivation from your leaders? When was the last time you were inspired to kick somebody's ass and just charge that hill? Right? You get slammed every single day. You get turned down. You get turned down. You make calls. You get turned down. You lose deal after deal after deal. You need that motivation as much as you need a direction. And then the other part, which is the biggest part, and I've had major conversations with Rob. Thank God he's been there the whole time for me, because he gave me purpose. Like he gets it. Like you need a purpose in life. You need a purpose in business. And I'll tell you what, that out of all my lessons in the military, probably the biggest one I learned is that purpose trumps all. Purpose trumps all. I can't tell you, because direction is what your leader gives you or what you give your team members, right? When you're sitting at your desk thinking how this is going to play out. But what happens in real life? It never plays out the way you thought. So then the purpose takes over. Because the purpose, as long as you know the purpose, then you can accomplish the mission. So focus more on the purpose, the why, right? Virginia covered that too. That's the why. This is the long definition, right? Same thing. Here's a little triad that I love. Maneuver, firepower, and protection. It is the leader who will determine the degree to which maneuver, firepower, and protection are maximized, and who will ensure these elements are effectively balanced, and who will decide how to bring them to bear against the competition. Really 3 unique words there, right, that we don't normally use in a civilian world, but they're completely civilian. Maneuver, firepower, and protection. You as a leader determine maneuver, firepower, and protection. Very military. Maneuver is just how to move from a position of disadvantage to advantage. It's objection handling. You do it every day. That's when you move, right? You move to get a better position. You're running into an obstacle and you got to move around it. So that's simply maneuver. One of the classic business maneuvers of all time is Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett did a classic business maneuver. 1969, Warren Buffett is a prodigy, right? He's made millions. He's got millions in investors. He's blowing up the investment world. He's the greatest thing that ever happened to the investment world. And he does a bold maneuver. Forbes says possibly the greatest business maneuver ever in American history, in business history. All of a sudden he says, stock market is too out of price. There's no value in the stock market. He returns all the money to his investors. He returns it all. No investor's ever done that. What hedge fund manager, what investment manager would ever return the money? He literally returned the money to all his investors and said, hey, I'll call you guys when I see value back in the real estate, in the investment world, right? You guys do that all the time too. You do those business maneuvers, right? You have that buyer and you're like, this is not the house. Just wait. We'll get you the next one. Don't force it if it's not right. You get to the seller and it's just not right. Maybe it'll be right next week. Maybe it'll be right next month, right? Is it right to list it before Christmas or before? You advise them. So those bold business maneuvers, or sometimes take a step back, will more than reward you. The other 2 in the triad there is protection, right? And firepower. You have a lot of firepower with Coldwell Banker, guys. We have so much firepower, all of the programs. Look at this building, right? We're in Rome right now, real estate equivalent of Rome. If you didn't feel that as you walked in. The columns, I have to think the architect designed it as Rome. You feel like you're coming into the Colosseum when you walk in, right? So we have that firepower. Leverage that firepower as best you can. So you're either maneuvering, firepower, and the protection. That stays, that's life, right? You're always protecting. In business, you're always protecting yourself, right? God knows, please protect yourself. You don't go out there and guarantee a sale price. You have to use some judgment, right? So the same military definitions for leadership is completely applicable in the civilian, in the business world. There's no change. I think I changed 3 words in there, from combat to sales power. This is the entire definition. So now I want to close this lesson with a little something. This is a little animal, kind of little take on the animal world, right? Please remember this when you close out. The mindset. That's what Michael asked me to come here today, is to talk about mindset. In the animal kingdom, the biggest, baddest animal is the king, right? It's the lion as the king of the jungle. The mindset of the lion is amazing. The lion is not the biggest or the strongest animal in its kingdom. It's nowhere near it, actually, to tell you the truth. That's the funny thing about it. The animal that is this one. But the freaking elephant sees the lion, and what does the elephant think? The elephant thinks, run. The lion sees the elephant, and the lion thinks lunch. So think freaking lunch when you go to that next listing. Walk in the door and think lunch. That next recruit, the next appointment, you walk in, you're thinking lunch. This is where I would throw some F-bombs, but you guys get that part. All right, well, that was lesson 1. All right, so lesson 2, this is a fun one. Lesson 2, and guys, I'm sorry, I have to go to the podium because I have some audio-visual stuff here that I'm trying to control for you guys. Lesson 2 is fun, right? Lesson 2 is inspire. I learned this as a second lieutenant. Wow. Inspire is one of those things that you're like, what does inspire mean? To me, leadership in one word is inspire. If you do nothing else, inspire me, for God's sakes. I don't need you to be the smartest person in the world. I don't need you to give me all the directions in the world. I'll figure the shit out. Just inspire me to be better than what I am. That to me is leadership, right? But that is such a complicated definition we very seldomly use. And I love the Latin root of this word, inspire, is to give breath to give life to, is to inspire someone. And I could think of no better military example of inspiration than, hopefully you're familiar with it. I want you, this, talk about badass, right? This is, if you're not familiar with the story, it's the Battle of Thermopylae, ancient Greece, 480. I'm looking at Dave, the Greek history, right? King Leonidas gets a mission. King Leonidas' mission is go up and delay the Persian army. He's got 300 men. The Persian army back then was estimated in the millions. Today, historians think that army was more like 300,000. You've got 300 men and your mission is to delay 300 freaking thousand. How do you do that shit? How do you don't, like you literally don't. I love it when you Wikipedia this stuff and it says there was a tactical defeat. Tactical defeat because all 300 died. But they held the Persian army of 300,000 at that mountain pass for 3 days. Do you think King Leonidas could have done that remotely? Seriously. There's no freaking way. He was in the front lines the whole time. That's the only way the other 299 stood behind him for 3 days. Now, they were also tactical genius, right? They found the mountain pass where they could only fight their best 300 against our best 300. So they were like, game on. Let's bring it. Because it's your 3 against my 3. Let's see who wins, right? They held them for 3 days. The Persians had enough casualties that it took them another 7 days to get out of that battlefield. And by the time they got to Athens, the Athenians kicked their ass. Mission accomplished. They inspired those soldiers. And if you do anything, if you want to read military history, for God's sakes, read the story of King Leonidas. All right, here we go. You ready for this one? Almost threw it, Rob. I held it back. I held it back, man. I'm proud of myself. That is pretty inspirational stuff there, guys. Seriously. Study that shit. Like, how does King Leonidas do this? How did those guys not run? What does it take to inspire somebody to that level to say, I will die for you today? I will die for you today, right? That's a different level of inspiration, guys. That's my second lesson in leadership. Whoa, how's your adrenaline? All right. Spartans. Let's move on to persevere. This is an easy one, right? Persevere. This is something that I learned in life as a young second lieutenant going through Ranger School, getting my butt kicked, going through food deprivation, going in the swamps, getting thrown out of every goddamn airplane the Army ever had. And the only thing I ever figured out that's going to get me out of this hell is to persevere and not give up. Because I saw shitty leaders make it through. I saw great leaders make it through. I saw strong guys make it through. I saw weak guys make it through. And I've seen that in life, and I've seen it in business, and I tell my kids, the one thing I can guarantee you is that if you need to accomplish the mission, you need to persevere. Maybe for a day, maybe for a week, maybe like the Spartans. But if you give up, I guarantee failure. And that shit's easy to do, right? You get that all the time. People come up to you and they predict failure. That's my favorite, when people come up to me and predict failure. I'm like, you're such a freaking loser. Like, seriously, you're impressing me? Predict success and then go out and work for it and sweat and bleed and dive and grind a centimeter at a freaking time. Persevere through the shit. Now you've got my attention, right? If you're willing to persevere. Perseverance is the all-important. And I could think of no example, no blood and gore right now, no video clip. But this is something in honor of Rob, Valley Forge, right? George Washington, third winter in Valley Forge. George Washington wintered twice right around here. Actually, literally right around here, Morristown, right? I sent that text to you guys, remember? July 4th last year, I sent a text to the managers that I was working with. And I said, hey, July 4th, man, it's Independence Day. We all go through Independence Day. But do we ever take a moment to think, July 4th, right? Declaration of Independence. That was July 4th, 1776. These bitches fought for 8 years after that. 8 freaking years it took to accomplish what we declared and celebrate on 1776. It wasn't until 8 years later that we finally signed the treaty in Paris, where the British signed it over and gave up. This man, there is no greater American leader than George Washington, and he lived and fought right around us. Study how he persevered. No food, no armament. His soldiers didn't have even boots. They were bleeding. They lost 20% of Valley Forge just wintering over, just out of food deprivation and illness. Yet they persevered year after year, year after year. How did he keep the damn soldiers? They were all farmers. They had their wives and kids. Listen, I've served a few times in the military. I worry about my wife and kid being back home. And they have my direct deposit, and they have the cell phones, and they got all the shit. You're like, how did this do it? How did he keep them together without saying, hey, boss, I got to run, man. I got my wife, right? But he did it for 8 years. They persevered. And that's my lesson in leadership in terms of perseverance. It's not going to be easy. It's never been easy. We owe it to people that George Washington and the many that came before us that persevered through it. So that's my next lesson in leadership. And this was his mantra, was victory or death, right? So in terms of perseverance, George Washington, unlike what we think, that it was this glorious victory, that we beat the British, right? We got our ass kicked by the British guys so many times that we can't even count it. What we did is we persevered. We bloodied them a few times. Todd's not here today, right? But we bloodied them in Boston. Our Boston peeps should be real happy. New York, we got slaughtered. Philadelphia, we got slaughtered. We got slaughtered everywhere. Finally, we got them in Saratoga. We battled them. But it wasn't until Trenton and Princeton where George Washington adapted this. He said, guys, we can't anymore. We have to now adopt a new motto. It's going to be victory or death. And going into the battles of Trenton and Princeton, this was the motto. This was their challenge and password. Victory or death. It's that simple. And when you want something that bad, it's a win-win. It's a win-win at that point. The Spartans had a win-win. Your victory or death, you're like, bring it, man, game on. What does it matter at that point? If I die, I succeed. What the hell, we're going to live forever? Right? And if you win the glory. So victory or death is the mindset for perseverance. How am I doing, Tom?
I want to go play football.
All right. Here's one I'm really common with. Artsy one, right? Sun Tzu wrote back in ancient China, right? And the Japanese, the Asian cultures, they mastered that samurai warrior mentality, right? And I had the privilege right after 9/11, which is really funny. Where's Virginia? I'm so sorry. She goes through 9/11 and you want to psychoanalyze them. I went through 9/11 and I wanted to blow the shit out of them. I'm so sorry. And then we went through this process, right? But this is how I would start. We literally, my unit trained tens of thousands of soldiers deploying into Afghanistan and Iraq. And I'd always start with the same thing. The ancient Japanese crest, till this day, the imperial crest for Japan has these three emblems on it. It has the sword, the mirror, and the jewel, right? And the interesting thing is the Japanese are badasses in their own respect, let me tell you. But they realized very early that the sword, the symbol for might, wasn't the most powerful of the three. And wealth, as represented by the jewels, they realized, well, that's pretty powerful, especially in this country and in this company where we have the wealth and we're a billion-dollar company. That's something, to be recognized. But they recognize that the most important thing here is the art of self-reflection. Right? The mirror is the most important power in life. The mirror is the most important power. It doesn't matter who you are. You've got to be able to look at yourself. Shit, I look at myself all the time, and it's not good a lot of times, right? So you get back up, and you get back up, and you get back up. But the ability to self-reflect and really understand yourself, right, as know thyself, that is what sets apart greatness. And if you really want to study greatness and if you really want to achieve greatness in business, you have to first start within, guys. We get it all the time. You come to us and it's everybody else's fault, right? You're like, are you sure about that? You sure it's everybody else's fault? So this is what Sun Tzu said. Know thyself, know thy enemy. 1,000 battles and 1,000 victories. It's that simple. Study yourself, understand the competition, and if you really know that, you will win every time. It's that simple. But you've got to be willing to face yourself. That ability of a leader to be able to face itself is epic. Now, I'm doing good. I'm going to do it. I was a little worried. I'm like, I'm running out of time. Sacrifice, last lesson. Wow, this is going to be a good one too, because we're going to close here. It's a good one if I need my glasses, right? I got to read this shit. All right. Sacrifice, right? Sacrifice is something we don't normally associate with leadership, yet it is an integral part of leadership, is the ability of a leader to sacrifice. If you're not willing to sacrifice for the people you lead, they will know it. At some point, they will get to that place where they're like, I'm not following you anymore. It's too hard, boss. I'm going back to Athens. I'm done, right? I'm going back to the farms if you're George Washington's time. I'm done here. But sacrifice, in December of 1992, something I'm very familiar with, because some of my friends here will understand that. In December of 1992, the U.S. launched an operation, humanitarian operations into Somalia, right? Began as humanitarian operations. It was later memorialized in the movie Black Hawk Down. My daughter was just doing a little report the other day, and she's going through her master's at Rutgers University, International Relations. And her professor said, what happened in Somalia was an absolute disaster. Well, it ended in a disaster, no doubt. But I said, you got to remember one thing. Like that Black Hawk Down was one moment in time that was memorialized by that movie. That does not symbolize our operations in Somalia by any stretch of the imagination. That was one moment in a year-long campaign, most of it humanitarian, until my unit and I got there. It was right about March where we started doing combat operations. So as we go into combat operations in March, and then in April, and in May, things start getting escalated, right? The combat starts picking up. UN comes in. My unit becomes the only task force, United States Army Task Force Ranger, on the ground, responding on a direct mission, direct combat, day in and day out. Part of that mission and part of that movie was the scene displayed at Black Hawk Down. And this is the part I gave my daughter. I actually gave her the Medal of Honor citation for the two gentlemen that are displayed here, Sergeants Gordon and Sergeant Shughart. Because on that day, Sergeant Gordon and Sergeant Shughart had a mission. They were on the task force in the air providing precision fires on the ground. So they're providing precision fires as the rest of the unit, the assault elements, going into the compound. And they realize, oh shit, one of the Black Hawks got shot. So they radio in and they say, hey, one of the Black Hawks is down. Can we go and support them? My boss, General Garcia, says, no, we've got ground forces. They hover around on the helicopter, continue to provide support fire so that the enemy can't get at the down aircraft. 2 pilots, 2 crew members down. Finally, after 3 repeated attempts, sir, can we get in there and insert to protect them? General Garrison gives the command, go ahead and get in there. They try to land 2 times, they couldn't get in there. Finally, on the 3rd time, they landed about 100 meters away. And then the 2 of them, Sergeant Gordon and Sergeant Shughart, now think about that shit. They could have stayed on that freaking aircraft and they'd be here telling the story. Be a different story. But they said, can I get down there? Medal of Honor recipients, both of them. Both of them make their way fighting to that helicopter. Both of them get in there. Now that mission was supposed to last 2 hours. It lasted like 18. So by and large, we just ran out of ammunition, is what happened. At a certain point, you just didn't have enough ammunition. God knows we lost 18 American soldiers that day. The impact was about 3,000 on the other side. And we would have done more if we had more ammunition. But at some point, Sergeant Shughart and Sergeant Gordon realized, I don't have any more ammo. So they go down to the down crew members and they take their ammunition. And then they go back and they continue to fight. And continue to fight as they come in, trying to take them. And then they run out of ammunition again. Now, Sergeant Gordon looks over and he realizes that Sergeant Shughart is no longer alive. He fought to death. He got shot in the head and died right there trying to defend that down aircraft and the down crew members, right? So they gather the crew members, and then Sergeant Gordon does something that is very common in the military. He gives them 5 rounds and says, good luck. All right? In the Army, we always did something. Like if the shit ever came down, here's a few extra rounds. Save the last one for yourself. Like, this is it. I don't know if we can hold you anymore. He went back out and he fought with his pistol, and then he was killed. So the story I share with my daughter is, your professor is saying about a failed mission. Be careful. Read about that mission a little bit more, because there was a lot of people that dedicated themselves. And that art of sacrifice, guys, is something that is incumbent upon a leader. You have to really understand that part. And there is no leadership without sacrifice. So this is a little clip.
Like a startling sign that fate had finally found me, and your voice was all I heard, that I get what I deserve. So give me reason to prove me wrong, to wash this memory clean, let the thoughts cross the distance in your eyes. Give me reason to fill this hole, connect the space between. Let
Sacrifice, guys. There's no greater love than sacrifice. As a leader, we have to do that. And it's really funny, right? Because last week I went to Monmouth County 5 days in a row, and Dawn's like, you're back here again? And you're like, that ain't shit. Like, seriously, what do we do for each other in this business, right? To help each other go through it. We sacrifice willingly, and we give of ourselves for all of your successes, our mutual successes. And that sacrifice is often overlooked, but it is such a critical component of leadership. So in closing, I kind of went through a few things really fast, so I tried to move through. This is what we talked about today, and these are my 5 lessons to you. I hope you got some little takeaways. And I want to let you know, like, for me, the book, as I started, right, Once a Warrior King, that was a book. It was mandatory reading for us as a second lieutenant coming into Infantry Officer Basic School at Fort Benning. And they had a whole list of mandatory reading, and that was one that really impacted me because it's a story the author writes about his experience in Vietnam when he was once a warrior king. And he reflects on that. But I really realize that a leader cannot live in the past. A leader has to live in the future. Like, this is the first time I think I put 2 medals on my jacket that I haven't worn in years. Like, you can't do that. You just don't do that. Like, I did it today because I wanted to wear my Army Ranger tab and my Combat Infantryman's badge, because this was something I did in honor of everyone that I worked with and served with. But once a warrior king, the important thing for me is that once you're a warrior king, you always have to be a warrior king. And you guys have to do that. You guys have to reflect. You are such badasses in here. Single moms, right? Moms with handicapped children. Like, people that care for each other. Like, you go through so many hardships. Hang on to those little victories and make sure you remind yourself, just like that king, like the Lion King goes into there and says lunch, remind yourself that that's the mindset, that you are always a warrior king. All of us here. And what could we do? So guys, that's it. That's my presentation. In closing, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Too much. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. Love you all. Go get them.